Hello and welcome to another episode of Quick and Nerdy, an MSP-friendly how-to channel dedicated to Veeam-powered BaaS and DRaaS offerings. As always, I'm your host, Brandon McCoy, Solutions Architect. And today, I've got a great video for you. This is instant recovery to Azure. So we're talking quick restore. This is a feature that was released in version 13 of backup and replication. There are some requirements, and really I want to focus on using Veeam Vault and V13 to have disaster recovery at your fingertips and easy testing. So I've got a lot to cover and I'm trying to make this short, so let's get into it. Now, what are the benefits of this? Well, first of all, you can restore from on-prem, whether that's VMware, Hyper-V, Proxmox, and more. Instantly recover that to Azure. You can restore from another cloud. Maybe you have some EC2 instances that you want to instantly recover to Azure. Maybe you want to restore from one Azure region or one Azure tenant subscription to another. This is disaster recovery in minutes once you've got it set up. You can use this to do some testing and then tear it down. Or maybe you just want to migrate to the cloud. Now, I will say that migrating to the cloud, you may just want to use restore to Azure versus instant restore to Azure. And we'll talk about that just a little, but first let's talk about some considerations. Restores happen in the service provider or the customer's Azure tenant. So this is not a Veeam Azure service. All we're doing is migrating the data into your subscription, your tenant of choice. So that's of course gonna come with some costs outside of the Veeam. So that's compute, memory, networking. For instance, when you perform instant VM recovery to Azure, we deploy a helper appliance. This is like a VM that kind of sits side by side your VM that we're restoring. And there's one for every VM you restore. So if you restore 10 VMs, we deploy 10 helper appliances. Those helper appliances are running the whole time you're in this instant recovery process. So what you will learn as we go through this video is there is a temporary place where you're running the VM in a disaster instantly, and then at some point you need to either finalize that and maybe move it to Azure or bring it back to production. But in that middle place, these helper appliances are running. Also, if you decide to finalize this process and restore it into Azure, if you want to bring it back, you'd have to reverse the process. So you could use Veeam Backup for Azure or a Veeam agent, back that up, and then do recovery to VMware, recovery to AWS, or wherever it originally came from. This is only supported for version 13 and later. With Vault, you can have your own Azure, or you can also use the external repository for Veeam Backup for Azure, which also supports Vault. And of course, I recommend Vault because it's just easy, it's simple, it's managed by Veeam from a storage account perspective. Restore to Azure is different than instant recovery to Azure, kind of like I was saying. Restore to Azure uses restore proxies to make things faster, whereas we use these helper appliances. So make sure that you read the documentation. You can just Google instant recovery to Azure versus restore to Azure. They have different use cases. So with that, let's jump into the lab and get started with the process. So here we are in the lab, and one of the first things that I need to do is I need to connect my Veeam server to an Azure compute. This is what I need in order to be able to spin up these helper appliances and restore the VMs into my Azure account, right? So that'll be the first thing. You can do all of this stuff during the restore, but obviously it makes much more sense to do all this stuff ahead of time. That's the whole point of the instant recovery when you're running around crazy during a disaster. So let's go to credentials and passwords from the home screen, and we're gonna go to cloud credentials. Okay, you can see here I've already got my Vault and that's been added in. I'm gonna click add and I'm gonna select Microsoft Azure Compute account, okay? So we'll give this a name. I'll just call it Brandon Test, okay? You can put in whatever you want there. Deployment type, we're gonna do global. Now, Veeam can create a new app registration, or if you already have one, you can use that and you'll need to manually put in the tenant ID and the application, the certificate, secret, all that. I'm gonna have Veeam create one for me. Just do the easy button and click next. So this will take just a minute or two, okay? Now, we're gonna do a device code flow. So I'm going to copy this code. I'm going to go to my Azure portal with this link and just verify my credentials. Okay. Okay. All right, once you have established your MFA, we'll continue here. All right, looks like we're good to go there. We'll head on back to the Veeam server. Now, this Linux support, enable direct restore of Linux-based machines. So this confused me when I first did this. This is not used for the instant VM recovery to Azure. This is used for the restore to Azure, which, obviously that process takes longer, but it's a finalized process once it's done, versus the instant is like spinning, you have a flat tire, you can put on a spare real quickly, get back on the road, but at some point you have to change that tire. That's kind of the difference here. And so again, this is for instant VM recovery to Azure. So even if I have Linux VMs I want to restore, I don't need to do this unless I am doing direct restore to Azure. And then I have to do some additional steps, which isn't part of this video. So let's just click next. We're going to create that account within Azure. And from there, I'll be able to do the next step, which is deploying the first helper appliance. And what this does is this actually creates an image gallery inside of Azure next to my app registrations. And those are going to be my families of VMs. All right. Now, depending on the number of VMs you're restoring, you may have to go and look at your allocation of VMs in the family. I think there's different size allocations and you can increase those. That's all done within Azure. I just restored one VM during my testing and I was able to do everything with default. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so that took about 3 minutes or so. Here's my details, kind of blurred out, of course, but I'm also gonna configure a helper appliance so that I can do instant restore to Azure. Okay, so you can click that button. If you forgot to click that button, there's another place under backup infrastructure where you can add that helper appliance or edit. Let's click finish. And this should load up that helper appliance template screen. And again, this is where I'm creating my gallery images. All right. So it says here, to speed up the initial processing and reduce restore time, a customized template will be prepared and registered in the Azure Gallery in advance. So you can select a subscription, a resource group, all that stuff that you've already created in Azure, or you can have Veeam create it for you. And that's what I'm going to do here. Again, I'm trying to make this as easy as possible. But again, you can get flexible and customize. So these are all my subscriptions. Okay. I want to use the one here. This is my education free one. And pick a region. I'm going to go with US East 2. Sounds good. And I don't have any resource groups or storage accounts or virtual networks, but if I did, of course, they would be listed here. I would select those. Obviously, there's reasons why you would want to kind of pre-configure some of that, but we're doing the easy button. I can also put in some tags if I want, so I can recognize and search for those within the Azure portal, but let's just click OK, and let's click Next. And so Veeam is going to create all that for me. Of course, that'll take just a few minutes too. All right, so I fast forwarded ahead. That took about 15 minutes. So it could take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to deploy all the resources if you're doing it from scratch. If you're using some existing subnets and things of that nature, it may be a little bit faster, but thought I'd throw that out there. And again, this is why we do all of this in advance, so that when we do the restore, everything's ready to go and it's fast. So let's assume for a moment that the customer environment is down. Not only is their production environment down, but their Veeam server was destroyed too. So all you have is a Vault storage bucket with some customer backups in it, right? So what are we going to do in that scenario? We don't even have a Veeam server. Okay, I'm not going to go through every single step of reinstalling a Veeam server, but just kind of think through it as I'm talking here. So, and of course, if you've still got your Veeam server up, great. That's one less step. You just perform the restore process. But I wanted to point out that this is true disaster recovery. So if you had to, you have a secondary Veeam server. Maybe this is in a different network, powered off, ready to go in case of this scenario. Or worst case scenario, you have to deploy backup and replication version 13, next finish through the wizard. And I don't even think you have to install a license for, when you're doing restores, because we charge based on the backup. So once you have your Veeam server installed, you all you need to do is, re-add your information. Now, if you have your configuration backup, if you had saved that to maybe Vault or maybe a local hard drive, USB, then you can use the configuration backup to restore your Veeam server with all of the settings. And if you encrypted your configuration backup, it'll also keep your certificates and passwords and all that. So if you were following all those best practices, good. We can come in here and we can do a restore from the configuration backup. I just spun the server up, so to be honest, I don't have one. So this is worst case scenario. All right, rather than restoring all my settings, I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna once again put in my cloud credentials. So make sure you put in those Azure Compute credentials again, right? Go to your backup infrastructure, backup repositories. You're going to add your Vault repository again, right? And this is for a true disaster. The Veeam server's gone. If everything's up and running, you don't have to worry about these steps. It just depends on your situation. So now that I've got my Azure Compute, I've got my repository, the helper appliance also may have to be reconnected here so that I can communicate with everything. You don't have to redeploy the helper appliance. You'll just connect to the existing one. So I've got everything set here. Everything's back to where it was. I do need to import those backups if this is a full disaster, right? So I don't have my configuration backup. I don't have my Veeam server. I'm starting from absolute scratch. So I'm going to import the backups. It's going to scan that Vault repository. It's going to import the backups that it finds, and you'll see those under the tree here. There'll be a new tab that says imported, and now you can use those backups to perform your restore. So whatever the scenario is, we are now ready to perform instant VM recovery to Azure. Okay, so I can do this a couple different ways. I'm old school, so I prefer to go to the restore ribbon up top and select the platform that I backed up. In this case, I was backing up some vSphere machines. All right, I'm gonna restore from a backup file. I'm gonna select entire VM recovery. And again, I can do entire VM restore to Azure. So think about the spare tire analogy, right? I got a flat, I can pull in and I can take a couple hours while they put on a brand new full tire, and then I'm good to go. Or I can put on my spare tire right there in the middle of the road. I can put on the spare tire while I'm driving, right? And I can get back on the road in seconds. But at some point, I'm gonna have to switch that tire out. Just like a real spare tire, you can't drive on it forever, and it's not as fast as a real tire. So instant recovery is what we're doing here. And we're doing instant recovery to Azure. We're gonna find the machine that I did the backup from, right? You can search in a bunch of different ways. I'm just going to choose this VM right here and the latest restore point to where I know things were good, okay? And again, you can do multiple VMs, but there's going to be a helper appliance VM spun up for every single machine you restore, so keep that in mind. All right, it's going to find my subscriptions, and it created some of these for me, but I'm going to stick with my free one here. And remember, we were in East US 2. You want to have these helper appliances and hopefully the Vault all in the same region as where you're going to restore from. Typically, you'll have this all planned out. Foundation Vault doesn't let you choose the region. I believe Central is the default. If you have Advanced Vault, you were able to choose the region where the backups were stored. Azure does charge egress for inter-regional transfers, so keep that in mind. And plus, it's faster if you can just keep everything in the same region. So next here. Okay, the VM size. So you can edit this if you want. I believe this is just the default that it goes to when you do the restore. So if you need to change that to a different family class, you can. So I'm just going to leave this as is. The disks, I can look at different disk types. And so this is some of the more advanced things. I'm just going to leave all this as default. The Help Center will get into the specifics, or you can always reach out to your engineer if you really want to deep dive into some of these settings. Which, by the way, I do really recommend. As I went through these videos and did some testing, there were a lot of things I learned along the way, things I thought I already knew. In a real disaster, you don't want to be learning these things. This was all kind of pre-planned. So reach out to an SE, reach out to a solution architect like myself. Let us walk you through some of this, read through some of the docs, understand firewall rules, permissions, settings, public and private endpoints, limitations and considerations, all before you really have a disaster. Now, one of the things that's interesting that I ran into, and I kind of ran into it as I made the video, so I'm just going to keep it like it is, show you guys kind of my error, and we're going to fix it here on the fly. But what happened is, so I selected a resource group, and just like everything else, Veeam can create one for you, or you can just choose an existing one. So I decided that I want to put this resource, this recovery in the same resource group that all the other Azure stuff is, so that I can clean it up a little easier later. Okay, you can also create a new one. And so that's what I expected for the networking. And also, if you remember, when I created the helper appliance, it created a virtual network for me. It created a subnet. It created all the things that I needed. So I figured, hey, I'll just come in here and I'll select for it to create a new virtual network, or I'll use the one that was created with the helper appliance. Well, it doesn't do that. So this is one of those steps where not only do you have to create your own, it won't just create a new one for you. You also cannot use the same virtual network that the helper appliance is deployed in. So Veeam deployed this helper appliance template, and it deployed a subnet, security group, virtual network, all that stuff. So I figured I would just use that one, but it doesn't let you. So you will need to create the virtual network ahead of time. In a real life scenario, that's probably what you would do anyway. You would have all these things predefined. I just next finished through my subnet with the amount of networks, and it's pretty open. It's not locked down, not very secure. So in a real environment, of course, you would go through all those safety checks and make sure that you have everything secure, everything correct. So I did go in to Azure. I paused the video and I went into Azure and I created a new virtual network. I call it Azure DR Restore. Okay. Subnet is the default subnet I created. Now it will create a network security group for you, right? I didn't create one of those, but that's where you establish a lot of your communication and firewall rules, port tables, and all those types of things. Public IP address. So if you want to be able to access this machine directly, you can assign a public IP so that it can be accessible from the internet, or of course you can not do that and be more secure. I'm going to go ahead and assign it because this is all just for testing. There's really nothing in there I'm too worried about. Okay. So the helper appliance, like I was mentioning, this is the virtual network that it was created in, and the storage account. So I don't have one of those either. So it will create a new storage account. So it seems like the virtual network that's separate from the helper appliance is all you have to kind of create yourself, which obviously you'd want to do anyway. So next, all right, if you want to give a reason, I'm just doing a test. Review everything that you've done. You can enable a boot verification, kind of like a heartbeat test if you'd like. I'm just going to leave that as is. I'm going to click finish. And I'm going to pause the video, but when I'm done, I'm going to show the time of how long it took so you can see a real life example of how instant VM recovery is. All right, so we are finished, and this took right around 5-6 minutes tops. Now it was one VM. However, we're not actually necessarily moving all this data. We're caching changes and we're reading it from the repository, right? So even larger VMs, it shouldn't really be much of a difference. It's the number of VMs that we're having to spin up. But this was one VM, took about 6 minutes. I'm done. I can now log into Azure and verify that VM. So let's do that. All right, so here I am in my Azure Visual Studio subscription, my resource group that Veeam created for me, and I can see the VM here. It is up and running. I'm unable to log into this machine, but you can see that it's running here. Now, one thing, if we go back to our spare tire analogy, we're not finished, right? We can't just leave this like this forever. You can't run on that spare tire forever. So what we need to do is we come into the instant recovery process that's running, and this is, again, pulling data from the Vault repository, mounting it on some compute so that it can read this data as it restores these VMs with the helper appliance. So this isn't as fast as being on production storage. And also, you can't run on this forever because we're caching all the changes that are happening. And when we're done, we're going to migrate those changes to the base VM, and we're going to restore that fully. So when you right-click here, you have the ability to migrate to production or stop publishing. And if I click migrate to production, I have some options, okay? I can do it automatically. As soon as the VM is restored, boom, we're gonna flip the switch and we're gonna, migrate, build that VM. It'll take a few minutes, right? Depending on how much cache. So like the longer you run this, the more changes you make, the longer it's gonna take to finish this. So if you feel like you're gonna be in Azure for a long time, you may wanna go ahead and do this as soon as you can, like maybe when it's not so busy, it's not crazy, but also you don't wait too long. If you want to manually do this, you can. You'll have an option to just go in and click, or you can schedule. Maybe this is like a planned migration. You can schedule when that's going to happen. So if I just do automatic and switch over, and now this is going to take the VM from the backup files that it's reading off of. I didn't make any changes to the machine, but all those would be taken and rebuilt into the VM. And then I would have a production virtual machine running in Azure. I can leave that going for the rest of my life. When this restores, the helper appliance will spin down. So you'll no longer be paying for that, which is another reason why you got to think about how long you do the instant recovery for. So we'll let that finish and then we'll wrap up the video. All right, so that one took about 10 minutes or so to get everything moved over. We can see some of the operations here with the caching and the publishing of the VM. The migration is successful. There are other options. For instance, if you wanted to maybe just do some testing, you could do the instant VM recovery and then click the stop publishing option instead. So instead of migrating it, you could just cancel. That would erase all the changes. So obviously don't do that if this was a DR where you wanted to save the changes. But if you were just doing this as a test, spin up the VMs real quick, make sure they're running, and then undo any changes and go back to normal. So that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, keep on Veeaming in the free world.